Hello viewers, welcome. Today we are going to discuss a tragedy. The name of the tragedy is Macbeth. The tragedy of Macbeth. Full title is The Tragedy of Macbeth. This is a tragedy by William Shakespeare. It is thought to have been first performed in 1606. It dramatizes the damaging physical and psychological effects of political ambitions on those who seek power. Of all the plays that Shakespeare wrote during the reign of James I, Macbeth most clearly reflects his relationship with King James I in this play. And it was first published in folio of 1623, possibly from prompt book, and it is Shakespeare's shortest tragedy. And here I will discuss some points and I will discuss some characters. Then we will go to act-wise summary of the play. Now let's discuss. The first character is Macbeth. Macbeth is a general in army of King Duncan, originally Thane of Glamis, then Thane of Cawdor, and later King of Scotland. So he was a general, and Macbeth is hero of this play, and he is cousin of King Duncan. King Duncan is king of Scotland, and his ambitions make him to murder the king and become the king himself. Now next character is Lady Macbeth, Macbeth's wife and later Queen of Scotland. So that lady is, it is she who ensured the murder of King Duncan, but she wilts under the pressure of her guilt and goes mad at the end of the play. Then there is Banquo, Macbeth's friend and general in army of King Duncan. And he is a very good man, and he is another able general of King Duncan. Banquo is close friend of Macbeth. He suspects that King Duncan has been murdered by Macbeth. For knowing the secrets of Macbeth, he has to die. He has to die. Now there is a Fleance. Fleance is Banquo's son, and Fleance escapes attempts of his life by Macbeth. Then there is Macduff. He is Thane of Fife. So he is a Thane. He means he is a sub ruler of Fife, and he is a very loyal to King Duncan. He is a Scottish general who suspects Macbeth of murdering King Duncan. He swears vengeance and kills Macbeth. So he is a very powerful character in this play. Then next is Lady Macduff. Lady Macduff is Macduff's wife. Then there is Macduff's son, and there is very important character called Duncan. Duncan is king of Scotland. He is a very benevolent king. But what happens is that that King Duncan is a weak and old king. So he is murdered by Macbeth. And then Malcolm. Malcolm is Duncan's elder son. And then there is Donalbain, Duncan's younger son. Then there is Hackett. Hackett is queen of witches, and there are three witches, and they play a very important part in this play. Then there are some minor characters called Ross, Lennox, Agus, Menteith, Caithes. These are Scottish thanes. Thane means ruler under the king, that is sub ruler, and we can say Nawab in Hindi. And then there is old Seward, general of English forces. Then there is a young Seward, Seward's son. There is Satan, Macbeth's armorer, captain, the Scottish in our Scottish army. So now we have discussed the main characters. Now we will go to act-wise summary of the play Macbeth. Here, Act 1, Scene 1. This short scene establishes the supernatural elements in play and introduces the three witches, or we can call weird sister. Shakespeare has called them weird sisters, not witches. During the disorderly scene, the witches reveal their plan to meet Macbeth. So, what happens in Act 1? On barren heath, on the barren land, in thunder and lightning, among thunder and lightning, three witches meet, and they go and they agree to meet again on the heath, on the place called heath, after storm will be over. And they show their desire that they want to meet Macbeth. They has planned to meet Macbeth, and they say that when the battle has lost and won, and before departing they say fair is fall and fall is fair for them. So so this was the scene first. The next scene two. Duncan is king of Scotland, and after hearing a report about a battle against the traitors, which included an account of Macbeth's glorious feat on that battlefield, Duncan orders that the title of Thane of Cawdor, which currently belonged to one of the traitors, be given to Macbeth. So what happens in this scene? There is a rebellion against King Duncan, and the rebellious person is MacDonald, and so he rebelled against King Duncan, and Duncan sent Macbeth and Banquo to fight against those rebellion, and they came victorious. So a bleeding sergeant comes from that war, and it comes to King Duncan and says that he says about the bold deeds of Macbeth, how bravely Macbeth fought in that battle, and he behaved like a valiant minion. And he informs the king about the way in which Macdonald was a rebellious person, was murdered on the battlefield. And he also relate how Macbeth was ably assisted by Banquo in overpowering the Norwegian king. So, what happens here? When there was a rebel against King Duncan from Scottish soldiers, that Norway is a place, Norway is a country, and the people of Norway and King of Norway supported those rebellions. So, so in this aftermath, what happens? The news delights the king, and he orders his men to provide his bleeding sergeant proper medical assistance. Soon, what happens? Soon after this, his departure from the presence of King Ross, another soldier, comes there, who hails the exploits of Macbeth and Banquo. They again praises Macbeth and Banquo, and he compares Macbeth to Bellona, bride's groom. Ross tells the king, King Duncan, that the Norwegian king, the king of Norway, was assisted by traitorous Thane of Cawdor. So there is another important character called Thane of Cawdor, and he was ruler of Cawdor. Cawdor is a state in that Scotland, and he supported a king of Norway, and he supported MacDonald. So he was a traitor. And Ross also informs the king that the Norwegian king is seeking peace. Now, Norwegian king has changed his mind, and he wants to be in peace with King Duncan. The king, delighted by the exploits of his cousin Macbeth, confers upon him the title of Thane of Cawdor, whose instant death is also proclaimed. So here what happens? That Macbeth is not just a general of army in King Duncan's army, but he is also cousin to King Duncan. And so King Duncan is very happy with Macbeth, and he orders that the title taken by Thane of Cawdor, earlier Thane of Cawdor, will be given to Macbeth, and Thane of Cawdor will be executed after one day. Then what happens? Next, scene 3 begins. After relating some of their foul deeds, the witches encounter Macbeth and Banquo on their return to Duncan's camp. They prophesies that Macbeth will become Thane of Cawdor, as well as Thane of Scotland, as well as King of Scotland. However, they predict that Banquo, rather than Macbeth, will produce a line of kings. After the weird sister disappears, Macbeth learns of his obtainment of the thaneship of Cawdor, and begins to contemplate the other part of his prophecy. So here, what happens in this scene 3? Scene 3 is very long. Here, what happens? The three witches, which has earlier promised to meet Macbeth, as agreed earlier, meet at the heath near forest. So forest is a place there they meet, As they prepare their charm, they prepare their magic, they chat among themselves about small matters. The third witches woo to punish a sailor because his wife, besides cursing her, had refused to share her chestnut with the witch. So they are talking about petty things. Then Macbeth's arrival is announced. In the meantime, what happens? The witches also prepare their charm. The witches tells Macbeth and Banquo returning from battlefield, and they meet them. And the first words of the Macbeth unconsciously echo the word of the witches when he says, "So fair and foul a day I haven't seen." So, this was the same sentence told by witches. So, there is similarity between sentence of Macbeth and witches. The witches greets Macbeth and Banquo. They hail Macbeth with triple honors. They call him the Thane of Glamis, then the Thane of Cawdor, and then King hereafter. Macbeth is Thane of Glamis as he is a heir of his father, who was Thane of Glamis. The second title is about to be conferred on him by the king emissaries, king's agents soon, and the third he would usurp. Third he will take by murdering King Duncan. Now Macbeth is a very ambitious person, and he has a so much evaluating ambition that he can do anything to get the throne of Scotland. Lesser than Macbeth, then what happens? Macbeth is surprised at these prophecies made by witches. Banquo, who accompanies Macbeth, asks the witches to prophesy about him also. Then they hail Banquo as a lesser than Macbeth and greater, and not so happy yet so much happier. They tell him that he shall be father of a lineage of king, although he shall not be king himself. Then the witches prepare to disappear. Macbeth commands the witches to explain their greetings, why they called him all these things. You must explain me why you told me that I will become so and so. But they refused to oblige him. They said, "Oh, we are going, we don't need to answer you." As Macbeth and Banquo discusses these strange, haggard creatures and their prophecies and predictions, Ross and Angus, the emissaries of King Duncan, come there and greet Macbeth as a Thane of Cawdor. This surprises both Banquo and Macbeth. Why? The latter that Banquo burst out in surprise that can the devil can the devil speak true? Oh my God! The witches were telling the truth. Now it has come truth. Now two prophecies of the witches prove true. It is only the last prophecy that need to be proved right. That Macbeth will become Scotland. Concealing his thoughts and concealing his ambition and pleasure, Macbeth asks Banquo if he believes that the prophecy of witches regarding his sons would proves true. So he is concealing his thought and he is asking about Banquo that do you think that your sons will become king one day, as witches has prophesied? Then Banco says, however, he is a very serious person, he is a very intelligent person, and he is not so ambitious like Macbeth. He says that he feels that the witches reveal only minor truth to cheat people in big enterprises. And in his musings, Macbeth feels that he may become king without having to kill King Duncan. That is, he may become king by fate. So here Macbeth is also at first thinks that I don't need to kill Duncan to become king. I may become king already because these witches, these supernatural beings has prophesied about my kingship. So now we move forward to scene number 4. Act 1, scene number 4. Back at the royal court of Scotland, Duncan names Malcolm. Malcolm is his elder son, as heir to Scottish throne. Significantly, Macbeth sees this recognition of Malcolm as an obstacle that he must overcome in order to become the King of Scotland. The scene ends with Duncan indicating that he will stay at Macbeth Castle that night. So here in the scene four, what happens? In the back at the forest. Forest is a place of king's palace, and here Malcolm is the eldest son of King Duncan. He described to his father that how the how that thane of Cawdor, who was a traitor at the time of death, confessed of his treason, and thus died with dignity and peace. King Duncan says that no one can detect a person's character by looking at his face. So we can't detect face, we can't know feelings of any person by seeing his face. As he makes this statement, Macbeth and Banquo arrives at that place, at that palace of King Duncan, and King Duncan thanks his two generals, Banquo and Macbeth, very much and very sincerely. He was a very sincere, he was a very benevolent king. He was very good natured king. People loved him, and the people of Scotland loved him like a father. And he tells Banquo that he too would be honored by the king in like manner in which he was honored Macbeth. He has honored Macbeth. Now, then the king declares that since he has grown old, he would like to name his successor, the next king, and he names his eldest son Malcolm to be heir apparent. So Malcolm will be king after Duncan. He is named the Prince of Cumberland at present. After this, King Duncan declares that he would visit Macbeth at Inverness. Inverness is a place where Macbeth Palace is situated. As soon as he knows that the king is to visit his palace, Macbeth decides that this is the most opportune time for him. This is a very important time for him to take matters in his own hands. If he has to implement the prophecies of witches that he shall be the king hereafter, so he decided that this is the time when I have to act very thoughtfully and I have to do something to become king of Scotland. Now we will move forward to scene 5. Now, upon hearing the news of prophecy and Macbeth's new title through a letter, Lady Macbeth reveals her imperial ambitions through her famous dialogue, and that is a "Unsex me here" speech. Before Macbeth's arrival, she predicts that he won't have the will to actively pursue the throne, so she feels that she will have to convince him. When Macbeth arrives in that palace, she presumes that they will kill Duncan, but Macbeth refuses to discuss it at that time. So, that queen, that means wife of Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, is a very ambitious woman, and she is very cruel also, and she has no scruple in herself, and she doesn't believe in morality. And so, what happens in scene 5? At Macbeth's castle in Inverness, Lady Macbeth is seen reading a letter. She is reading a letter from her husband, and which describes his that Macbeth's meeting with the Duchess, who prophesied for him the crown of Scotland, and all that things happened in the battleground and the palace of the Duncan. She at once senses that she must encourage her husband to murder the king at the earliest possible time and available opportunity. While she is thinking of instigating her husband to catch the nearest way and easiest way to crown of to the crown, a messenger comes telling her that King Duncan would soon be visiting Inverness and their palace, and this pleases Lady Macbeth a lot. This news pleases her a lot. Now she invokes for the help of supernatural forces so that she may fulfill her bloody resolution of getting rid of King Duncan. So then soon Macbeth arrives there and they have a brief conversation, and the course of action is decided upon by them, and they plot to murder King Duncan. Then we will move forward to scene 6. Here what happens? King Duncan and his party arrive at the gates of Macbeth Castle. Lady Macbeth greets them and leads them into castle of Inverness. So in this scene 6, King Duncan, accompanied by his two sons, Malcolm and Donalbain, and there is Banquo, and he visits Inverness. He is accompanied by many ministers and nobles also. They are very warmly and cordially welcomed by Lady Macbeth. Lady Macbeth is a very good actress. She can act very well, and she can hide her feelings very well. The king, entering the castle of Inverness, comments upon the pleasant atmosphere of Macbeth's castle. Banquo agrees with this opinion. They maintain that this castle has a very pleasant atmosphere because the temple hunting martlet, that is a kind of a bird, has made its nest there. So this atmosphere is very sacred. King Duncan greets Lady Macbeth as a fair and a noble hostess, but uh, he little knows what fairness awaits him in this castle. So King Duncan is a very innocent king, and he is totally unaware of what is going to happen with him in that castle, and he is swept away by the welcome he gets in the palace of Macbeth. Now we will move forward to scene 7. In this scene, uh, in in uh, in his first true soliloquy, Macbeth contemplates the consequences of killing Duncan from a variety of perspective, revealing his inner struggle with questions. Also, Lady Macbeth executes her plan to convince her husband to commit regicide through a combination of insulting her husband's masculinity and demonstrating her own fierce support of this course of action. And this scene ends the first act with Macbeth resolved to kill Duncan and obtain the Scottish throne. Now here what happens? In a room in this castle, in his castle in Inverness, Macbeth is seen debating in his mind about the prophecies of his murdering King Duncan. The King Duncan was a very good king, and Macbeth says that he should not kill him because, besides being his relative, because besides being his kinsman, he is his king and benefactor, and as such, he should not raise his arms against King Duncan. But his vaulting ambitions urges him to go ahead with a plan of murder. So Macbeth gives way very much he is very much against killing Duncan, and soon Lady Macbeth comes there, and and Macbeth tells her that they should not proceed any further in this enterprise of killing King Duncan. But Lady Macbeth is a very cruel person, and she begins to reproach her husband. She begins to scold her husband for this lack of courage, and she calls him coward, and she reproaches that. And she urges him to carry on with the act as originally planned. So she tells that don't deviate from our plan. You must proceed in this plan. She says that she cannot take him as a man unless he proceeds ahead in this path. And uh, here Lady Macbeth tells us that they had thought of King murder even before her husband met the witches who promised him the crown. She tells her husband that had she once decided on a course of action, she would have proceeded ahead with her plans. She cannot see failures as the two chamberlains of the king have been drugged and the king is fast asleep. It is through her pleadings and demonstrations that Macbeth ultimately decides to carry on with the task of murdering King Duncan. So, Lady Macbeth convinces Macbeth that we need not to worry because this charge of murdering King Duncan will not come upon us, but instead we will frame these chamberlains who will be sleeping with King Duncan in that room, and we will put the weapons of murder in their hands, and we will frame them so we can get victorious. So in this way Macbeth agreed to plan of his wife. So in this place this act 1 ends. Now we will discuss act 2 in the next video. Thank you so much for listening to me, and please watch next video, that is act 2. Thank you so much.